welcome to another edition of Quarantine Diaries. Today, I have the privilege of chatting with a group of volunteers who have converted their passion for cycling into a not-for-profit organization that supports the needy in our society through raising funds by riding long-distance cyclists that have become a part of this initiative, much like a walkathon, but on bicycles. So I have with me today Peter Lai, who has been a founding father of the pioneer old guard, let's say. And he's been through Bike Aid organization since its inception. So I'm looking forward to hearing some exciting stories on that front. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Next, we have Shireen, Khanalim, who, as we fondly know as Mama Bear, because she's the one we see all the time every month when we go for delivering these rations. Her key roles, among many others that I cannot elaborate on, are she supports secretariat function to all of the fundraising activities. She helps coordinate support activities and crew when we go on these annual bike rides. She also supports and coordinates all of the monthly ration distribution activities in more than 5 locations that I last know of around Singapore. So welcome, Shireen.
Yeah, you give me too many hats to wear. My little brain can't take such confusion.
And lastly, I have Siming, who is a passionate cyclist, enthusiast, and an integral part of the Rfr Ration family, who we have been both associated with Rfr Ration for a long while, but we haven't met physically because Siming goes to Hougang and I go to Chai Chi. So nice to see you virtually, Siming.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on the call too.
You know, Peter, we have heard legendary stories of how this all started way back in the day when 7 cyclists randomly decided to ride long distance in 1992 to raise funds, and they were able to raise upwards of 60,000 Singapore dollars in those days to over a 4-day ride and support the cause of Spastics Children's Society. Can you share some more stories? I mean, part of the family already has heard these legends, but for the rest of us who don't know, it will be really interesting to hear how this all started.
Certainly, Zahida. But firstly, I just wanted to say I'm actually not a founding father. I'm a father, but not a founding father for Bike Aid. That honor goes to Manjit Singh, who unfortunately won't be able to join this call today. But it actually started with him. His son actually asked him one day, he said, "Daddy, why can't we do something for the underprivileged?" So Manjit, over coffee, got a few friends together, a bike shop owner, a journalist, accountant, a university professor, and they basically came up with the idea. And eventually 7 of them decided to plan for and train for this ride to Penang. As you said, it's about 1,000 kilometers away, 900 to 1,000 kilometers away. And they decided to do this and use this as the mode of raising funds, like a walkathon, but you cycled instead. And very often the ask of of the donors is that, donate 10 cents per kilometer or something, right? And basically that's where they did. They were not the cycling enthusiasts, but they were recreational cyclists. And so there's a passion to cycle, but there's also, more importantly, the passion to help the unfortunate or the underprivileged. So I think that's how the essence of Bike Aid came about back in 1992. I only joined them because I was a university student at that time, and when I read in the newspapers about this endeavor, I was quite inspired, and I wrote to Manjit at that time and said, "Hey, can I join this?" But it was too late. But so in 1992, the very same year, they organized a second fundraiser, and that's where I think a lot more of us were able to participate. It was a very short ride to Mersing and back over the weekend, and subsequently, every 2 years, this bunch of people who have their full-time jobs, just as you do, put together their heart and soul and organize these things every 2 years. As we a long ride, we've cycled as far as Thailand before, and very similarly, it's, please donate 10 cents per kilometer. For 1,000 kilometers, that's $100, right? But of course, we will accept whatever people want to donate. And we started out doing that to raise funds for various charities. Every 2 years, it might be different. The Spastics Children's Association has been one beneficiary. We've also had the Hospice Care Association, the Children's Cancer Foundation, and a whole bunch of others every 2 years. And then about maybe 10 years ago, we decided that, this is quite difficult to do because we've got a small bunch of cyclists, a small bunch of fundraisers who are expected to raise a large amount of money. Why can't we scale it better? And that's where Shireen and company stepped in, right? And they've got a different concept where you have a much larger participation. Instead of everyone having to commit to a whole week of cycling, you just do it over the weekend, for example. And this fund, the funds raised, can be provided for a specific community that we can nurture and grow and be more sustainable. And that's basically how Rfr Rations came about 10, 11 years ago and to what it is today. So Bike Aid has kind of evolved from a small number of fundraisers, a bunch of beneficiaries, to what it is today, where you have a lot of more participatory and a very specific beneficiary.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, like, this is a good example for us in the corporate world about how agility matters and how things dynamically take shape to be relevant to the current times, right?
Mm-hmm.
That brings me to Shireen. And can you talk a little bit about what specifically is Rfr Ration and how has it evolved since what Peter mentioned about from Bike Aid days?
Hi, Sam. Rfr Rations, basically 11 years ago, a couple of us were at Marsiling attending a function, and we kind of got bored with the function, so we decided, hey, we've never come to a block with one-room flats. So we walked around and we noticed that, oh my God, the blocks are painted so beautifully, but the families that stay here, we've never seen such families. We've never seen such houses, a one-room flat. Basically, it's a corridor, and then there are two houses, one on each side. And within that one-room flat is a kitchen, toilet, a small hall area, and a sleeping area. And we were quite stunned. We sat down and we talked about it. It's like, hey, for us to spend $50, at that time it was $50 per month. To spend $50, we spend $50 so easily over a pair of shoes, dinner, McDonald's. Why not put that $50 aside and help a family? And by doing that, we're not solving their problem, neither are we totally removing the pain that they may be facing, but at least we can in a way add some quality to what they currently are already facing. So with that, we went down to the Sunlove office and we said, hey, we want to donate, two of us, each one of us wants to take one family. Can you identify the family? So they gave us a family. We went to NTUC, we packed the stuff and we donated. And then as usual, we went around telling friends, and from 2 families, it went to 10 families, and then it went to many families. That's when we came in touch with Bike Aid Singapore. And we thought, hey, Bike Aid Singapore has been doing fantastic stuff all these years. How do we marry these two concepts together, whereby, like what Peter said, it is a structured ride, whereby we cater to one particular group of people. So yeah, that's how we came under the umbrella of Bike Aid Singapore, and now we are part of Bike Aid Singapore, and we started organizing rides. So in our first ride, we ride from Malacca to Singapore. Day 1, we ride from Malacca to Batu Pahat over 105 kilometers. Day 2, from Batu Pahat to Singapore over 140 kilometers. That's a total of about 245 kilometers. And for every participant, they pay for everything. They pay for their jersey, their hotel stay, their insurance, everything. That's the registration fee that they pay. And then
so the participants funds themselves,
yes,
right?
Correct. The participants fund themselves, and then they go out there, like what Peter says, for every kilometer, 10 cents. But in this case, they would go out and say, hey, I'm going to ride for the weekend. You dig into your pocket and come up and support us. And that's how we raise funds. So from 2 families, currently we are supporting 440 families with rations worth $70 every month. and 200 children with breakfast every month.
That's an amazing story and enough to inspire my Sunday, I guess. So I want to bring in Ziming here because what Shireen said was so relevant. When I first was involved in, I don't know, 2012 or early 2013, that's the image that struck with me in terms of, oh my God, we could do so much more, right? And we're so comforted in our own houses with all the privileges and pleasures we have. And then when you step out and see that there's someone you can always make a difference to, I think it just lights up a bulb in your mind. So I want to ask you, Ziming, how did you get involved and what drove you to get, I mean, an average volunteer like me or anybody else, we do these things, that's it. But you do way more and you've become now an integral part of the family. So what drives you and how did you get involved?
So I started cycling back in 2010. After cycling for a few years, I realized that Singapore is really a very small island to cycle. And when there's no objective to keep on cycling longer distance, faster, it sort of get boring, right? So then I got involved in some charity rides, even before Rfr Ration. And then in 2016, some of the group members say, hey, there's a 250 ride over 2 days from Malaysia down, pretty well organized. And then come join us. And then I said, okay, sounds fun. 250 over 2 days. We take a bus up to Malacca, have good food, and then we ride down and we eat along the way. More about that maybe later.
Lots.
I joined Rfr Ration, but what Shireen maybe has not mentioned is you cannot just sign up for Rfr Ration, fund yourself, and then you get to ride. So when I first joined Rfr Ration, they say, in order for you to ride, you must come for 2 distributions, right? You must come. Because if you don't come, you will not know what you're contributing to. You will not know who is benefiting. And so that started. And I say the same to the people who donate for the cause. I say, if you do not want to cycle, you can be a support crew. If you do not want to be a support crew, then being a donor, I will invite you to come for ration distribution. So some of my donors came and they saw for themselves what are they donating towards. So Rfr Ration, over the years, I've gotten more people to come whenever possible. And this year we managed to get 1 corporate to come, which is quite fun, but unfortunately we're not going overseas. Last year was very excited, right? Because this year was 10th year, and then we have all sort of fantasy. And then the COVID came, and then all the fantasy went down the drain, but never mind. So I said that this is Rfr Ration. Last year I got new friends involved in Rfr Ration, and he joined us. And after the end of second day, we ride 1 more day last year. After that second day, we end up in Batu Pahat. And then he asked me a question. He says, hey Ziming, we rode for about 150 clicks already, but we keep eating, So this Rfr Ration, we ration ourselves or we ration other people, right? I said, well, that is part of the fun. We ride hard and we go to places where there's good food and we eat. And at the same time, we raise funds and we provide rations for those needy families. So I thought, what goes around comes around. I mean, riding for cyclists can be fun. If we are not conditioned, then it takes a bit more from us. But then if we raise enough funds for the needy family, then that will last them a longer time. So this year, again, we are pushing ahead for Rfr Ration in a different format. And so usually as riders, we are encouraged to have a minimum amount raised. But this year, when I asked Shireen, I said, hey, Shireen, new riders has been asking, what's the minimum amount raised? And Shireen said, as much as you can. So I was a bit shocked. And now that the shock factor has settled down, I think it's a good litmus test for those who come on board to see how far they push themselves, right? To see whether they are for the cause and how much more funds can we raise when we say as much as possible. Very often as business people, we often say if we do not set an amount or we may not get profit. But then there are businesses which I know to say that pay what you can, they end up making much more because those who can afford tend to give a bit more to cover for those who cannot. And those who cannot tend to still want to give to cover costs. So net is the profit. So I'm waiting to see at the end of the day whether we have more funds
than
raised.
before, right?
Yeah, by saying raising as much as you can. Yeah.
I must jump in and add to what Ziming is saying. Zahida, you've been using the word family from the beginning. Right for Rations is indeed a family. It's amazing because every now and then there are so many initiatives that come about and people are touched in many different ways. The rationale for why we changed to raise as much as you can because like what Ziming says, we have a spectrum of cyclists. Last year we had raised at least $700 per participant, but participants came back, a pocket of participants came back with each person raising 10,000, 40,000, 30,000, 25,000. Participants use a pledge card, a physical pledge card, and they write in numbers in there when they collect the money. You have participants who came back with $2, $2, $5, $2, $10, $5, $2. Then they ask for another card and it's $2, $5, $2, $5. And they come back to me with 4, 5, 6 cards. And each quantity of $2, $5, $2. And you really appreciate the amount of effort that they put in, although the total amount may not amount to $700, it may be $400, it may be $500, but they are part of the family because for us, they have already spoken to like 100 people. And that message of Right for Rations has gone out to 100 people. I think the amount is not significant anymore. It is the message that has gone out and how it will touch people and how it will get people thinking. And they may not land up doing things for Right for Rations directly, but they may land up going out there and doing special things in their own way for people when they see it. And I think that's the meaning of Right for Rations. I mean, that's the family, the Right for Rations family. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. That was very well put. I want to ask Peter, right? I mean, Ziming mentioned earlier the COVID down the drain crisis, right? I'm sure like being a social organization, being a sport cause, going into a social organization couldn't have been easy in the pioneering days as well, right? So I want to ask about how was it then, right, to ask for cyclists to pay their own way, convert their passion for cycling into a social cause that is closer to their heart, and what challenges might you have faced? We're talking now about 3 decades worth of experience of this organization. Can you throw some light on what it could have been then?
I think at least in the initial years, 20, 30, 20 years ago, 20 over years ago, or whatever it was, 10 to 20 years ago, I think, like I said, the concept was quite different. So many people, when they participate in a bike aid fundraising event, they participate from the perspective of wanting to challenge themselves because most of them had not ridden so far. And what is kind of a social contract. We're telling them, look, pay your own way. That has not changed. So even for Right for Rations, right? You've heard Shireen mention everyone still needs to pay for the costs, right? Every single cent that is raised goes to the charity, goes to the beneficiary. So the same thing happened from the very beginning. So when we tell people that, right, every cent that you raise goes to charity, we will step forward and we will organize it and make it nice for you. So it's going to be the best experience that you can possibly have from a bunch of volunteers like us. But on what you need to do in return is to raise funds for charity. So when many people stepped forward and they did so. So we had between usually 10 to 30 cyclists. And like what Shireen said, they would have to raise lots of money. So they between 10 to 20K sometimes, right? But there will still be some who cannot raise a lot. But they've already put up some money already to pay for the expense, right? And the effort that they've spent, as what Shireen had mentioned, making people aware of the beneficiary, that is actually the most difficult part. training for the cycling event is actually something you just do as a discipline, but getting yourself to get out there and to ask people for a donation and explain why they should put money out of their pocket for this particular cause, that is actually very, very difficult. And, I think many people will be able to share a lot of different stories, how sometimes you think someone who can afford to make a donation actually doesn't, and someone who you think might only make a small donation actually pours their whole heart out. It's actually very gratifying, the whole exercise of raising funds. So over time, I think, even though it may have been difficult to get these things off the ground, we do find people who will willingly step forward to make that effort to raise funds because they believe in the cause, whereas the cycling is just secondary.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to ask Shireen in terms of today, right? How has Right for Ration evolved? We're talking about obstacles and crises in this journey of a social cause. How did it impact you during the lockdown? Because the hunger is never going to wait, right? Whether crisis or no crisis, you still have to deliver rations because it's a social contract, like Peter rightly said. So, what challenges did you come about, and how did you circumvent them during lockdown when we couldn't get out of our homes and we couldn't contact anybody?
I think one of the things that happened was that we had already started our planning for Right for Rations 2020, and we are very excited because it's our 10th anniversary this year. So we started our planning last year, and everything was ready, registration page, design, every single thing was ready, and we launched it. Just as we launched it, and we had the first group of about 10 people who registered, that's when COVID started. And we were stunned. We didn't know what to do. I mean, normally when we open up registration by the second week, we already have numbers in terms of 40, 50, 60, 70 participants registering. Now we had 10 people and nobody else was registering. We were like, what do we do? So waited for a while. Then the committee stepped forward and said we have to do something about it. So this idea of the Strava ride came along. But again, when do we change? When do we start making changes? Because it's going to impact a lot of things. It impacts design, it impacts the registration page. Said, let's hang on. By mid-April, we said, no, we have to activate something. Otherwise, it's going to impact everybody. So we called up all the 10 participants. We explained to them, now we're not going to cycle from Malacca to Singapore. Do you want your money? Do you want a refund, or do you want to join the modified ride, which is the Strava ride? So most of the participants says yes, they will switch to that. Then when do we set the date? So we set it for July. We thought, okay, by July, by end May, everything will be okay. Let's set the date for July. But again, things changed. And we're like, okay, what do we do? So now we changed the date to September. And what hit us hard was the registration portal that we normally use to do all our registration, to streamline everything. That registration portal had to close down because of the situation. They can't sustain their business. So they had to close down. So now we don't have a registration portal. How do we register participants? So we went to every single thing in Bike is done by a volunteer. So like the logos that you see on Ziming's screen, they are designed by volunteers. So now the website, the gentleman who's hosting our website and managing our website, we approached him and we said, can we use the website as a registration portal? So he said, okay, we can do that. So he went into the design phase of making it into a registration portal. Then how do we manage payment? Oh, PayPal. If we use PayPal, then we will have to incur an added cost. Who pays for that cost? Oh gosh, let's do PayNow. So then we had to go to OCBC to register a PayNow account. uh, and then we went through the registration. And now we launch the new format, right? Fundraising has picked up a little bit, but we're still far from our target. We have a shortfall of about 250,000.
What is the target?
We're aiming for $429,000. With $429,000, we'll be able to sustain 440 families with monthly rations of $70. and 200 children with breakfast. We are currently at about 183,000, so we have a shortfall of 245,000. Yeah, a little bit challenging. We're quite scared. We don't know how the numbers are inching up. Leverage on this amazing platform, Give Asia. They don't charge a service fee, but the credit card charges apply, and the fundraising on Give Asia is picking up, but we're still far from our target. I think we need to reach out to more participants. We can ride as a corporate and achieve a target at a distance that you want to. You can come in as a family. So as a family, you can target to cycle 200 kilometers. 200 signifies the number of families that we help with breakfast. 440 kilometers signifies the 440 families that we help with rations. So over the month of September, target as a family to achieve that, either cycling indoors or cycling outdoors in your small family unit, and clocking in that mileage and then raising funds.
And I know from experience that these 440 units are comprised of a particular profile of society, like Peter mentioned very early on in the chat. And I know the Rfr Rations supports the mentally infirmed and those with dysfunctional families where the children don't have the privileges where our children normally have to, like an enrichment center or classes for every single thing in the weekends. And I know in the time that I've been here, it has scaled up this initiative from basically providing monthly rations to also adding on the breakfast, building a study center in Chai Chi where the children can come and learn things, again, by volunteers. Somebody was teaching Google for a bit to these children, basically building their profile over learning. Actually, that is in good stead now because home-based learning and distance learning are becoming a norm of the day, and these children somehow had that little bit of a trailer or a curtain raiser before this became the norm now. So I want to ask Ziming, so Shireen and you talked about the new format and how anyone can make a difference. My understanding is that if I'm not a cyclist who's used to doing long distance like Peter, who almost rode to Thailand, and that scares me because I don't see myself doing that. So in the new format, what's your advice for beginners who may not have the confidence? That someone like me, right? Can I ride 50 kilometers in my own house? Because we don't know when these restrictions are going to be lifted, what flexibility we'll have in September. But what is your advice to me to make myself a target of 50 kilometers, and how can I achieve that easily?
I think the spirit of Right for Ration, I want to talk about it first because even when we are riding overseas, there are many different categories or cycling groups formed to cater for cyclists of different levels, right? We have those that with the swanky road bikes that can fly down the street, and we have those that are on mountain bikes with knobby wheels, and we have a bunch of people that are on foldies, right, with 16-inch wheels. So everyone rides at their own pace, as long as the cyclist is able to, or feels or think that he or she is able to, and they want to ride, they will have a cycling group to go to. And the cycling group will have a support vehicle to go to, right? So in the past, the earliest group from Batu Pahat to reach Singapore can be as early as 1 p.m. or 2 p.m., can be. And the last group that come in can be as late as, what, Shireen? 8 o'clock?
8 p.m., yeah.
8 p.m. So you can see that when cyclists have the will to ride, then Right for Ration will cater for them, will wait for them, and will allow them to finish their course so that they can fulfill their commitment and be answerable to the donors that support them. So when we bring the spirit back to this year, now as we speak, we can cycle in groups of 5, all right? Which potentially means that if everyone is good boy and good girl, then when we come into future months, we maybe go up to a group of 10 or 20 or I don't know, right? So responsible cycling. Therefore, one, if you can definitely, as cyclists, we can definitely cycle at home on a bike trainer. Some say you can do Swift. I would say it is very boring with the trainer giving constant resistance. You can't roll down a slope, for example. So I for one will not do my distance in an indoor trainer, right? I will definitely be outdoor. For young new cyclists who are not so confident, well, you can go for 200 km, and there's 30 days for you to finish 200 km. So theoretically, if you cycle 1 km a day, you can't finish. But if you cycle 10 km a day, you can potentially finish it. 10 km a day on a 4D is not an incredible feat, right? Like I stay in Bishan, from one end, go to the other end, come back, you do 2 loops, done. Yeah, it's 10 km. Takes you about an hour or so, right? So definitely doable. For those who are the more adventurous ones, they can probably finish 440 in 4 days, 3 days, something like that. So it makes it easier when there is a group that cycles with you, right? Then everyone comes together and ride. In the most recent sign up, I have a friend in the cycling group that I'm in and say that, hey, I've not been cycling for a long time. Will I be able to finish the distance that I signed up for? So my response to him was to say that, well, for every day that you take to cycle and you want company, I'll come and cycle with you. So I think with a group, it is definitely easier. Indoor is really boring. I won't recommend that. We are tracking on Strava so that we know how much distance is covered by every rider. But on the road, small group, definitely doable now. Okay. Road bikes, mountain bikes, 4D. I've not seen anyone on recline bike yet now, Shireen. So also, as long as you can ride, you can cover the distance. I believe there are 30 days in the month of September for us to finish it. 8 days or weekend to finish it. If it's 8 days, 50 km per day. 50 km per day for a new cyclist, probably 2.5, 3 hours, you'll be finishing it. If it makes it any more fun, not taking weight management into consideration, there can always be food and drinks after every ride, which
that's
riders
motivating.
look forward to. Yeah. So we plan for an endpoint where there's good food and then we have good food. Right, Peter, right?
Absolutely. Food is critical.
Yeah.
No, Zimeng, I resonate with what you just said because every weekend, if my wife and I take our 2 younger girls out for a ride, we can easily do 16 to 20K each, right? So between the 4 of us, we will do 70 to 80K a weekend. 4 weekends, we will bust the 200K family limit anytime. So I think anybody can do this, right? And the thing is, I'm so keen to get my kids involved, to get them to go do the fundraising as well, so that they can talk more about the cause and also inspire their classmates, hopefully. So I think this is something that is now very accessible and very inclusive. I think this is more than any other time. This year is the year where I think more people should take part in Ride for Rations.
Coming back to children, I think, like what Peter said, to bring his daughters, I think children, the impact that children make, what children see, and the change that they can bring about is amazing. For Chai Chi, we had one young boy coming up to me and said, Auntie Shireen, my birthday is coming around the corner. I'm going to tell my friends not to give me presents. Can you give me a pledge card? Because I was giving out pledge cards. He says, can I also have a pledge card? I'm going to ask everybody to put the money in the pledge card. I had another boy coming up to me and said, Auntie Shireen, can I bring it and ask all my my principal, and I'll ask my teachers that my father is doing the right, so I want to raise funds. So children see things from a different perspective, and the change that they bring about is tremendous. It's just unimaginable. One example, my son, when we first started Ride for Rations, we did not give milk, and per set of rations was $50. And my son overheard me telling my mother that, hey, you got to take your Enlin milk. It's very good for your bones. So one day when we were doing the distribution, he went up to this elderly lady and said, "Auntie, auntie, you must take milk. Very good for your bones. You must take Enlin milk." And the lady looked at him and said, "I can't afford to buy milk." So he was stunned. He was like, "Huh? What does that mean?" We came down as we were coming down the lift. I said, "Yeah, milk is very expensive. One packet of milk can be about 15, 20, $25." As soon as he came to the distribution area, he shouted, "Papa, Mommy, from next month, everybody must get milk." And we were like, wow. And because of that one moment there, we changed it, and now every single recipient gets milk. So I think bringing children along is so important because they are our future, and what the change that they can make is just unimaginable.
This example I remember because it's not just milk for anybody, it's milk by the profile of the participant, whether it's a senior member or a child in the family or it's a working adult. So you categorize milk by the needs of the family. So there's some level of profiling in terms of what they need. So it's not random ration distribution for anyone and everyone. It's carefully thought out and dispensed by the needs of the recipient. And I have my own example to share around children that you mentioned, Shireen. I had brought a friend's family over to volunteer in Chaichi one of these Sundays. So yeah, the two little girls, one of them came, the other little girl was very small, so maybe she didn't understand the whole meaning of what we were doing. But the elder one, who was about 10, 11, somewhere in that range, she came and she absorbed, and she was too enthusiastic about her being the person wanting to disburse those rations. She wanted that touch of her being. And all the elderly that we dispensed to that day were blessing her with their hand on her head. And I don't know if it's a modern day child phenomena or something connected. And then we forgot about this incident and this experience for a while. Sometime later, I remember this child going through her belongings, her books, her toys, her things, and setting them away, because at the back of her mind somewhere she was thinking about the families she went to, and there was one particular example with three kids in that family, and just the mother and the father was absent for whatever reasons, and they were in her age group. And so she sorted out things that she no longer needed, and she came and delivered those things, toys and books and some of those things, clothes, to that family herself. You might remember this example, Shireen.
I do. Yeah, very touching indeed. It's amazing. Again, coming back to the concept of family along the ways, there was another incident whereby there's this lady who stays in one of the estates. Whenever we went to give out rations, she would only stay at home. She would not come out, and she had a medical condition that did not allow her to walk that easily. And I think about a year later, she came down to collect the rations, and she was walking properly, and we were stunned. We were like, for 1 year, what happened? Then she told us a story that one volunteer actually went to her, brought her to see a doctor, helped her to arrange for an operation, helped her with the medical fees, and this lady went through a huge operation to remove lumps that were preventing her from walking, and now she's mobile. And during that period, this volunteer looked after her two daughters and made this possible. And this volunteer never told us this. We never knew this story till this lady appeared 1 year later. So the Right for Rations family has impacted so many families, many stories that we will not know. Stories like Zahida you shared, we are aware of it, but I know that there are many other stories out there of the family doing something quietly and impacting. So it's not just the rations, but it's beyond the rations.
You know, that's so true about the social interaction piece, where there was a conscious wave within this community about reaching out to the segment of society, mostly our elderly, who have kids that don't no longer stay with them, or have moved abroad or overseas, or whatever the reasons, and not getting the pang of social isolation which tends to develop with these sort of families. And I do know that the initiatives we have around Hari Raya, around Chinese New Year, of making decorations along with them, and talking to these people and the stories we come out. And another example I remember of these volunteers making a difference is in one of the families where we realized that that home needed de-infestation of worms and mosquitoes in the house. No one was aware until this volunteer started chatting with this elderly uncle and realized that's a need. It's not an express need. It's not like the uncle said, I want this done. But the volunteer realized that this is something that the uncle could benefit from because he is incapable of going and sourcing a pesticide vendor and doing this for his small 10-footer home. So examples like these leave a lasting memory, right? You just think about it when you're sleeping, when you're watching TV or whatever in the back end. One of the legendary stories, of course, we have heard about is when I think it was in the early 2000s, when the group of cyclists was escorted toward Plaza Singapura to attend the presidential's address.
That was pretty cool. We were cycling from Thailand, and when we arrived in Singapore, the welcoming ceremony was actually hosted at Plaza Singapura, where the late President Nathan was to grace the occasion. So this was for the Children's Cancer Foundation. So essentially, we rode down the Orchard Road with police outriders. It was quite grand, actually, and not something that we were quite used to. Typically, the Bike Aid events are quite understated, so that was quite grand. And we're all in our yellow jerseys and everything. Cycled to Plaza Singapura, viewed the bikes in, got on stage. The president made a few remarks and gave out certificates to all the participants. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah, it was quite a good time.
So we live in the shadow of the stardom that you created and set the bar so high.
Well, I think that was largely due to the effort of, as I said, we typically try to keep it understated. That was actually organized by the Children's Cancer, that part was organized by the Children's Cancer Foundation. And we agreed to it because we felt that it was a good opportunity to also create awareness. So passers-by walking by, they may not have heard of Children's Cancer Foundation, but they see the stage set up, they see the president there, they see this bunch of crazy cyclists coming in their jerseys and bicycles, and then they'll start wondering, what's Children's Cancer Foundation about? And we had volunteers there giving out pamphlets as well. So I think everything that we do, it has to be for that, is to raise funds for the beneficiary or to create awareness for them primarily. And then cyclists all understand this, all the participants understand this.
And the volunteers too.
Yes, exactly.
So thanks for that, Peter. Shireen, let me ask you to close out our chat. What are the 1 or 2, 3 things that you want to leave as a message if someone's a cyclist, if someone is not a cyclist but can still help out, and someone who does not want to donate money but maybe they can get involved in any other way? Is there something you can tell us for the average common people, how they can get involved in such an initiative?
I think, first of all, the cycling portion. If you're a cyclist, come on board, join us, help us raise funds. If you are not a cyclist, you can still come on board as an ambassador, a Ride for Rations ambassador, and help us raise funds. If you don't want to be involved in raising funds, come and join us for the ration distribution. And that's where you will see what is it that you can do on an individual level to make a difference. I think, like what Peter said, it's not only about the raising funds, but creating that awareness and talking to people. There's some cyclists or participants who register and they are not comfortable talking to people about it. So say last year the fundraising was supposed to be $700, so they will put their own $700 as a donation, as compared to people who go and talk to people. It takes a certain conviction, and I think the conviction can only come about when you join us for the ration distribution. Come and join us for the ration distribution. It happens the last weekend of the month, the last Saturday and Sunday of the month, at 9:15 at 5 different locations. Join us on Facebook, Ride for Rations Facebook. We post this event there every month, and come for the ration distribution. See what it is, see what we do, see what the volunteers do, see how the family comes together, and then decide if this is something that resonates with you and you want to continue this journey with us, or if this is something you may want to choose a different path. So come join us for the ration distribution every month.
And Ziming, what are your words of advice for someone who has taken their passion, like I said earlier, to cycling, to converted that into passion for giving?
Said, come join us for ration distribution, regardless of whether you are a cyclist or not. That's one. And if you are a cyclist, then I would encourage for a cyclist to cycle for a purpose, for a cause. It can be competition, and at the same time, they can cycle for any charity cause. Well, I cycle for Right for Ration. As long as a cyclist is cycling for a charitable cause, I'm also happy for them, right? But if they are cycling for Right for Ration, I'm even happier lah. And right, like Peter says, right, it can be a family event. COVID is over. That doesn't mean that we can't do things together without being forced lah.
Absolutely. And for me, one of the lasting impressions I've carried in the last 8 years that I've been volunteering has been this image of families, right? Families with little children who come to make a difference, learn something new, or maybe just have a fun Sunday with their parents. And in the end, in turn, making a difference to somebody who they consciously are thinking about at the back of their mind. This is education in its highest form, in my opinion. And so I want to thank you. And I know that all of you have pressing Sunday. Shireen's son is going into national service today, so big day. And Siming, good wishes for the recovery of your father. I thank you for taking the time out while I know that you need to go back to the hospital. Peter, thank you as well. So I cannot thank you guys for making this time for our little chat. And for the rest of us who are watching, I just want to say, and leave you with the slogan of Right for Ration, right? Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much. So challenge yourself to a charitable cause and help put an end to the hunger. Join us in any which way you can.